Hey guys, for those of you who don't already know me, my name is Mikaylee Christensen, and this is my honors project presentation on modern science fiction, specifically Orson Scott Card and his works. In order to give a good base for my presentation, I wanted to talk about the science fiction genre. I have a really good definition from author P.L. Thomas, who defines science fiction as a genre that presents a fictional narrative, primarily supported by elements including science and technology. He goes on to say science fiction authors tend to blend aspects of time and place to create futuristic imaginings that comment directly and indirectly on the author's present. Some classic examples of science fiction that you're probably familiar with include Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Dune by Frank Herbert, and The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Many of you probably had to read Frankenstein in school, or possibly The War of the Worlds as well. Some common themes in science fiction include the human need to explore, alien invasions, the need to colonize, / having a lasting impact, and space travel. Some themes that are going to show up in this presentation include coming of age, manipulation, jealousy, compassion, isolation, competition, and ruthlessness, among others. Science fiction is incorporated in a lot of different platforms. There are science fiction movies, books, comic books, and TV shows, so chances are you've seen science fiction somewhere. Now that we have a good base understanding of what science fiction as a genre is, I would like to discuss my specific author of choice, Orson Scott Card. Orson Scott Card is an author, a critic, a playwright, a poet, a public speaker, an essayist, and a professor of writing and literature at Southern Virginia University. He's probably most known for the Ender Saga, which includes Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow, which are the two books that I have analyzed and I'm going to be discussing in this presentation today. He's also known for some of his short stories, including a collection called Maps in a Mirror. He's been the recipient of many awards for writing, including the Hugo Award for Best Novel on multiple occasions, the Nebula Award for Best Novel, the Locus Award for the Best Short Story, and the Hugo Award for the Best Novella. So he's a very accomplished writer. The book that Orson Scott Card is possibly known most for is Ender's Game, the first book in the Ender Saga. To give a quick summary, it's about a boy named Ender Wiggin, the third in a family of child geniuses, and he's selected by international military forces to save the world from destruction. He's taken to battle school, which is on a ship far from Earth, and is trained to be Earth's next hero against the alien race known as the Formics. He goes through battle simulations that later turn out to be actual battles that he remotely led against the Formics, eventually leading to the defeat of the alien race. The book ends with Ender finding a queen pupa and sees that the buggers, the Formics, did not truly wish to fight the humans, and he feels their sadness for all that happened. So Ender makes it his mission to find somewhere for the buggers to live. That was a very, very compressed summary, but it kind of gave you the gist of what Ender's Game is about, which is important because I'm going to talk about some of the themes that are in Ender's Game. Some themes included in the book are love, empathy, destruction, morality and survival, manipulation, and relationships between children and adults. I would like to elaborate specifically on manipulation, which is one of the themes that I covered heavily in my essay about Ender's Game. One quote that demonstrates this theme is one between Ender and Sergeant Graff, who was the adult who was responsible for taking Ender to battle school. Graff tells Ender, "I know you, Ender. I've been watching the monitor disc for some time. You won't miss your mother and father. Not much. Not for long. And they won't miss you long either." Graff makes Ender believe that his parents don't care about him, which leads him to his agreement to attend battle school. Later on in the story, as Ender is interacting with Graff, there's this quote, which says, "They both laughed, and Ender had to remind himself that Graff was only acting like a friend, that everything he did was a lie or a cheat, calculated to turn Ender into an efficient fighting machine. I'll become exactly the tool you want me to be," said Ender silently, "but at least I won't be fooled into it. I'll do it because I choose to, not because you tricked me, you sly bastard." Now another theme within Ender's Game is relationships between children and adults. The relationships between children and adults in this book are very warped. Children are generally seen as the hero within the book, and the adults are generally seen as evil. Graff tells Ender towards the end of the book, "Of course we tricked you into it. That's the whole point. It had to be a trick, or you couldn't have done it." So manipulation is very strong in this story, as are the twisted relationships between children and adults, and the glorification of children as the hero. The second book that I worked on analyzing is called Ender's Shadow, and it's actually a parallel novel to Ender's Game. Parallel novel meaning it's the same story but told from a perspective of another character. The other character's name is Bean. Bean is exceptionally intelligent, almost unnaturally so, and it is revealed in the novel that he is a clone created illegally by genetic alteration. He spends his early life on the street, fighting for food, fighting to survive. Bean is very young and very smart, and he joins a gang of children and works out a way that they can all get food at a local soup kitchen. But he attracts the attention of a nun named Sister Carlotta, who recruits him for battle school. It becomes exceedingly clear that Bean is not only smarter than the average child, but he's smarter than everyone at battle school, including the adults. Bean learns that Ender has been selected to be the savior of humanity, and he struggles to understand what Ender might possess that he doesn't. Bean is eventually given the task of creating a roster for Ender's army, and he places himself on the list. Ender soon begins to use Bean's intelligence to help their army win. And eventually Bean helps Ender defeat the buggers, the Formics, and the reader is left to question who the true hero of the story is, Ender or Bean. So it's the exact same story as Ender's Game, but it's just told from a little bit of a different perspective. There are some common themes between Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow, but I wanted to talk about specifically a couple of these themes that are pictured here. Specifically coming of age, because Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow are actually both examples of Bildungsromans, which we talked about when we studied Huckleberry Finn. So both of them are the growing of a young boy into a man, and both of them are great examples of Bildungsroman. So this theme of survival is very, very important in Ender's Shadow, because Bean is actually taught from a very young age that survival is the only goal to attain. There's a quote that actually says, "Being emotional didn't help with survival." So Bean is very, very much not an emotional person, but he is a very intelligent one, who can basically override his own emotions in favor of making the more rational choice. And this story also includes the theme of childhood, but more the lack of childhood, because both Bean and Ender have to grow up very, very quickly, and they are in many ways robbed of a proper childhood. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the significance of Card's works. Brandon Sanderson, Stephanie Meyer, and Dave Wolverton have all said that Orson Scott Card has influenced their writing today. His books have lasting effects on young minds, as they are aimed mostly towards young audiences between the ages of 12 and 17. The film adaptation of his book Ender's Game has brought his books to a larger audience and brought his stories to more people than otherwise may have ever seen them. In conclusion, Orson Scott Card has been a very important author for many young people. Through his writing, he's made a difference in many people's lives, including my own. He visits many important themes throughout his work, including coming of age and manipulation, and the film adaptation of his work brought his books to a larger audience. To conclude, I would like to note that Card is definitely deserving of a place in the science fiction genre and in the American literary canon as a whole. And here is my works cited and my images cited.